Jimmy,
Adam.
are collectible cards dead?
No. A lot of people think that way. Actually,
We'll see you next time.
no, you'll see it. I think what generally people were expecting for the last 2+ years is there's going to be a huge crash.
That's what people were expecting.
Yeah, I think it's like what goes up must come down.
I mean, that's usually true.
So things are, well, I like to call it softening. And what generally happens in any marketplace, right? Whether you're talking about Magic, you're talking about Pokemon, you're talking about TCG in general, or sports, or comics. It hits a certain plateau, it needs to readjust. Collectors need to readjust to see whether or not they have enough money.
For the last couple of years, we've been living in a strange world. Because we noticed, really starting about 2 years or so ago, there was a huge spike in the number of collectible cards, comics too, but really sports cards, Pokemon cards was a big one that people started picking up. Both people who were already picking stuff up, who started getting into the next gear, and also a lot of people who started paying attention during that period.
Absolutely.
And I think that you'll notice that those people who got on board when everything was starting to go double the price, triple the price of what these products were just a year before, people who started really getting involved there, might not be the same people who are going to still be buying years later, a couple years in, when those prices aren't increasing in the same way. That there are people who are going to be picking stuff up and then eventually realizing, perhaps because they haven't been as involved in this hobby for as long, that you can't hold on to everything forever and expect it to just be a straight line.
True. I mean, one other group of collectors that is also contributing to the overall population is guys who are coming back. You know, let's say you used to buy comics, you used to buy sports cards, you used to buy any of the TCG, whether it's Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, etc., and you had stopped. And then all of a sudden you see all these, breaks, you hear about the values, you hear everything. Then you started going, oh wow, the collections I have, I want to get back into it, right? So with all the collectors, all the demand that has happened, it really contributed to the price. And as you said, yes, it cannot keep on going up. Year one, year two, I think a lot of people just close your eyes, throw a dart at something, it hits, goes up, they see, hey, it continues to go up. And I think in the last year, I call it more like reality slowly coming down, right? Meaning you can't buy everything and not everything goes up.
I have absolutely seen that. I think one of the things that's also significant is when you get to a point where people who started picking things up very eagerly in a very short period of time then start trying to liquidate.
Yes.
I've seen this, and obviously it's going to be true for a lot of stuff, but I've seen this especially over this year with Pokemon cards. There were a lot of people who, especially for graded cards, really started buying things at a time when if it was a Pokemon card with a decent grade on it, it didn't really matter what it was. There was going to be a reasonable return there. And at a certain point, when you have a lot of people trying to sell those in order to, loosen up a little bit of cash that they put into their collection, when you have a whole bunch of those starting to come into the market at the same time, but not as many people who are trying to jump on board like they were before, it gives the appearance of an overwhelming supply that outpaces demand.
True. What I would also add to that, though, is this. As any new collectors, or anything new, right, that people are getting into, I like to call it like tuition, right? When you're not as familiar with the product and everything's all going up, you're just buying different things. And then now, second time around, you're like, okay, I've learned my lesson on some of the cards, right? I've learned my lesson, let's say when you're talking about sports cards, and that's something we can get into, that, oh wait, not all base rookie cards is gonna be incredibly valuable. And that there's actually a lot more of them than you actually think. And that's when people are now more careful in terms of what they're buying. They choose and pick what they like. And a lot of the collectors that were collecting for the last 20, 30, 40 years, they've actually had pulled out for a period of time during the last year or so. And now they're slowly coming back in because the price have somewhat lowered to a level where they feel like, okay, maybe now I could start buying some stuff. But that's where you're really now seeing sort of like the push and pull in terms of the price going down or the price going up.
So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
The sort of price softening that we're talking about, that we're seeing with not just single cards, but sometimes with boxes of new products that are coming out, just where the area that things are releasing at and what kind of price range they tend to stay in, can that also in some ways be a good thing?
Absolutely.
The reason I ask is, one thing that we noticed over the past couple of years, when you have every new product releasing at a very high tier or at a much higher tier than it would have been in the past, and singles consistently selling in a very high price range, that also, while it might attract a lot of people who are trying to jump on the rocket to the moon, that also isolates and alienates a lot of people who might not be willing to make as big an investment just to get started at an entry level for a product like Pokemon cards or baseball cards. So does that create a price point that people might still be able to engage in? Again, not so that they can invest thousands of dollars in and have the collection that's going to sell for $1 million and be on the cover of all the magazines, but to get a foundation in the hobby that's then going to grow into a lifelong passion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because at the end of the day, you only have a certain amount of budget, right? Like, let's say you have $100, you have $1,000 a week that you could spend. I mean, in the old days, I spent every single dime that I earn on buying comics. You know, it's like I'll go to the restaurant, I work, I get paid, and I just buy the weekly comic releases.
And then you just bought every comic that there is, so there are no more comics to buy, so you had to move to sports cards.
Exactly, right? And since I have my budget of X dollars, I think most people have a certain amount of money that they could spend. So now that the prices have come down a little bit, they could choose and pick, and they can kind of go, oh, well, this is a product I've always wanted. I wanted Chrome. I wanted Pokemon. I wanted Magic. I wanted the most recent set. They now feel like some of the products have now come down, that they could still spend the same budget. Now they could get more. Whereas before, they're only able to get one box or barely a box or barely a team if they do a group break.
Yeah. We have not seen as many horrified parents coming in saying, I want to get a pack of baseball cards for my kids. I don't know what this whole baseball card thing is about, but you know, I remember they have them and my kid likes baseball, so let's just get a little pack, maybe with some bubble gum in it.
Yep.
And they look and they see, what, $50 for 4 cards? And then, you know, we might have to call 911 if they have a heart attack. But
yeah, and nowadays, you know, $50 could still be for 4 cards. Sometimes could be for 1 card.
It could be, but there are options. It's
Exactly.
not something where every single product, even products that you would expect to be more of an entry-level product, are at an inaccessible price tier.
Yeah, I look at this as, you know how you're running and you're taking a breather? That's how I view it. Right now, it's a breather throughout the hobby. And it could be, you know, economics, could be whatever the reason that people might want to move away a little bit from it, but they will now able to go back and then pick and choose what they like and then move forward again. So, you know, soften and then steadily, in my opinion, will go up again. And I highly doubt we're going to see the same exact level in terms of the growth, tremendous growth that we saw like 2 years ago, like last couple of years actually.